You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You know, I wish we could find some way to hold people accountable. Free speech is a great idea, but we're in a war.
To make sure the economy doesn't collapse, I've abandoned free market principles to save the free market system.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You're listening to Common Sense Radio with A.J. Davis on the Lanterns Radio Network.
Welcome to the program, folks. You're listening to Common Sense Radio on the Lanterns Radio Network. How are you, Susan?
I'm blessed and highly favored, AJ. How are you?
I am peachy, and we have a jam-packed show for you folks tonight. We are lucky to have Trevor Loudon from NewZealBlog.com. How are you, Trevor?
I'm doing great. How are you?
We are... Actually, I'm wrong. It's TrevorLoudon.com. I correct myself. I apologize on that. We are great and so glad to have you on the program tonight. Is there anything more excited than having three patriots together to talk about freedom and liberty? I mean, what's better?
Yeah, but it's pretty invigorating, and I love, and this is what I love about touring the country, because everywhere we go, we get to meet, you know, the remnant, the real patriots in every city, and we get to have meals with them and long discussions, and it is exciting. You get really revved up and fired up, and that's, and you know, life on the road can be tough, but when you're meeting people like that all the time, it really makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Hey, Trevor, why are you touring right now? Because I know people are listening. They might be familiar with your name, but not know exactly why you're on tour. And can you tell us what you're doing right now that's taking you around the country to meet people?
Well, look, I've been writing books and making movies for a while, and I dedicate part of my year to touring around the States. I've spoken to over 400 audiences. I've spoken in almost all of the lower 48. The movie I put out in 2016, The Enemies Within, is part of my tour. It exposes, we say there's 100 members of the US Congress and 20 members of the US Senate who are so enmeshed in neo-communism or radical Islam, Muslim Brotherhood fronts, or all three, that they couldn't pass an FBI background check to drive a school bus.
Wow.
Well, they wouldn't be able to clean the toilets at any military base in the country, but they're running the Homeland Security Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, and they're using those positions to trash your country and your Constitution every single day. So I'm out there promoting my books, out there promoting my movies, and trying to get the word out before the elections that we've got to hold the House and hold the Senate, otherwise we are in huge trouble.
What's
Absolutely.
the best way then? I mean, we all know that we have to do that, and we all have to turn out the vote, and we have to excite the base and all of those things. But how do you motivate grassroots people? I know you're going around and talking to them. What is motivating them? Because you know this, the problem with conservatives is it is like herding cats. We are independent people. We don't like to bother people, and we don't like to control others. We like to live our own lives, and we don't really want to interfere with other people. But yet we are going to have to reach across the whole country, just like when Newt Gingrich had his, contract with America and he nationalized elections. That's what we're going to have to do to hold the House. What do you see as the best viable way to do that?
Well, look, what I'm doing what I'm doing from my point of view is there's far too many conservatives. Now that President Trump's in office, they think they've won the war and they all want to go home. Well, I say we've basically won the first game of the World Series. Right. But that doesn't mean anything It doesn't matter anything till you've won 4. We have to win 2018, 2020, and 2022 before we can even think about having a holiday. So what I say is it's really simple math. Now, Hillary Clinton promised if she got elected, she was going to legalize every single illegal immigrant in the country within 100 days of taking office. Now, just think what that would mean. There are between 12 and 40 million illegals in the country. They will vote approximately 80% Democrat. That is going to be anywhere between 10 and 24 million new Democratic Party voters. And when you consider that Mitt Romney lost his election by 2.5 million votes and Donald Trump won by 200,000 by the grace of the Electoral College, he actually lost the popular vote. You can see what 10 to 24 million new Democrat voters is going to do to America. It's basically a one-party state forever from that time. So I'm just trying to motivate people to get them to be aware of the consequences of losing just one election. But on the positive side, if we can string 4 good victories in a row, the economy will be humming along very, very nicely. We'll have a couple more Supreme Court justices. We'll have a whole more tax reductions, more government spending reductions. We'll have a much stronger military, and the country will be set on a path for great prosperity and freedom. And we will have a very, very good future. But we've got to win the next 3 or 4 elections to do that. If we go home now, it all turns to custard in 2018 and is a total disaster in 2020. And we have Kamala Harris as the president. Every illegal immigrant in the country and open up the country to massive refugee resettlement. And conservative Americans everywhere will be a minority and a very much persecuted one in their own country.
Not only that, Trevor, us white folks might get shipped out of the country. I mean, it's right now, 2018. We are on the edge of our seats for the election. And what are you seeing out there since you're traveling the country? Do you think they're going to flip some states like Texas, Arizona, Georgia, or Florida? Because I know those are the states that they're really focusing on. Is there anything that you are hearing from the grassroots or seeing firsthand while on your travels?
Look, I'm concerned that the grassroots, too many of them have gone home. Like I was just at CPAC, and normally that's a humming event. And this one was pretty flat. A, because there wasn't a great attendance, and B, there wasn't a lot of fired up sort of inspirational talk going on. So I think we have an issue. We've got a serious issue, and we have got to work like crazy. All of us who care about this work like crazy to get everybody we can to the polls in election season. You know, obviously with the primaries coming up to do that. But see, what we've got to do is not just elect more Republicans. We have got to be getting the most conservative possible Republicans into office, because President Trump right now has a lot of trouble getting stuff through because, you know, several of his senators are actually really Democrats. And we need to be priming those out and replacing them with real patriots. And obviously the same with the House. So I am concerned. I am not happy with the level of activity around the country, and we need to amp it up a lot.
How long have you been engaged in American politics, Trevor?
Well, on the sidelines all my life, but actually being here and touring around probably about 8 years now. Well, since about 2011, I've been actively speaking. Before that, I was more or less just writing from New Zealand. But yeah, a good 7 or 8 years. I've seen 3 election cycles here. I've spoken to multiple Republican, Tea Party, conservative church groups around the country. So I think I've got as good a finger on the pulse as just about anybody.
What motivated you to want to, leave New Zealand and come out here and roll in the mud with the dirty politics of America? What was it that made you do that?
Oh, it's a Texas barbecue.
All right.
Every good story starts with I was at Texas.
Brisket. No, well, that's part of it. But no, look, I didn't really intend this to happen. I was one of the first guys. Well, I was the first guy to identify Barack Obama as a Marxist. I discovered his ties to Frank Marshall Davis, and Glenn Beck used a lot of my information in his chalkboards, back in the 2009, 2010. Yes, and so as I got more known, I did 111 Obama files, and I got quite well known in America on the blogosphere. And then I started getting invited to conferences, like the Florida Tea Party Convention, for instance. And from that, I would get 10 more invitations. And from those, I would get 10 more invitations. And I just ended up almost continually touring for about 3 years. And I'm married to an American now, so that's more roots in the country. So, my view is very simple. I still love New Zealand, but if New Zealand is to survive, if any Western country is to survive, America has to survive. If we go down, if America goes down, the Chinese will have New Zealand in a heartbeat. They'll have Australia. Russia will dominate Europe. Iran will dominate the Middle East. China will dominate all of Asia and Africa and most of Latin America. And where the hell do you run to then?
We have always been
the shining beacon.
Yes, we've always been on the hill, and we have always fought against the forces of communism for our entire existence and tyranny. And I don't know how you motivate a nation, but perhaps you will do it by telling them the reality of what is at stake. It is their very freedom, their very existence is at stake.
I have a way to explain that.
Existence at stake. The whole existence of the free world is at stake. And so we've got a thin red line that's holding it all together. But I just want to say something about California. I was told this by the head of the Trump campaign. He said that the state that contributed more to the Trump victory than any other was California.
What?
They had 330,000 volunteers in California for the Trump campaign, 45,000 on manning the phone banks on any given day. And that phone banking they did into Florida, into Michigan, into Ohio and Pennsylvania is basically what made the difference. California saved America.
That's good. That's good to know. I know I did a little bit of phone banking, and it's easy to do. You just sign up to do phone banking, and you tell the people that I'm available on this day from this hour, and they hook you up remotely. That's the beauty of cell phones, and you just call as many numbers as you can, and then you're done for half an hour, an hour, whatever you have. So that's good to hear. I had not heard that we saved the rest of the country. That's good.
Well, you did, and door knocking is the very best way of doing it, but phone banking is the next best way. And anybody who's involved in a district where there is no meaningful election, or in a state where there's no meaningful Senate election, you can still get on the phone. If you live in Colorado, you can still be phoning into Wyoming or Montana. You can still be phoning into Texas to help Ted Cruz.
Oh, how important is that race?
Not being involved.
Oh yeah, they are targeting Ted Cruz big time. You know, I was thinking you might be a man that would know a lot of details about this, because we know already that the DNC is not raising a lot of money. They're flat broke, but they have a lot of money, and it's coming in from George Soros. And I wish you would explain to people who are listening who might not be very familiar with George Soros exactly who this man is and how he is really the one who is stealing our elections.
Well, right now in San Antonio, they've got a conservative Democrat who's the attorney, the sheriff there, and he's very anti-illegal immigration. No, not sheriff. He's district attorney, and he's actually a Democrat, but he's very, very conservative. And George Soros has poured over $1 million into the race to get rid of him because he doesn't like sanctuary cities. and George Soros wants to have sanctuary cities everywhere. Soros is a multi-millionaire. I believe he's basically an agent for the Russians ultimately, but he is laundering money. He's bringing money. He's pouring huge amounts of money into the radical left and the Democratic Party, but not just the Democrats. I say the radical left, and see the Democrats are weak. But you have organizations like Our Revolution, Indivisible, who are signing up tens of thousands of voters in the southern states right now. That's how they won the race in Alabama, the Senate race down there. That's how they flipped Virginia, once a very red state. They are pouring huge resources to sign up large numbers of Black, Latino, and Muslim voters in states where they don't normally vote in high numbers. So they're doing it in Texas, they're doing it in North Carolina, Virginia, Arizona, Florida. And the Republicans are going to be in for a huge surprise if they think that because they're out raising the Democrats in money, that's all they're up against, because they're up against George Soros, they're up against Indivisible, Our Revolution, and all of these Power Pack and all these other multiple groups that are putting billions of dollars into this. Soros put $14 billion into the movement recently. You don't think that's going to flip a few seats?
Of course it will.
Absolutely is. Did you? George Soros also started the SOS project as well, the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, because Stalin said it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes that counts. So they're trying to get as many left-wing secretaries of state in. But I'll just elaborate a little bit on George Soros, because most people are skeptical when I say I think he's an agent for Moscow. But because Vladimir Putin makes this big song and dance about, we hate George Soros, we hate George Soros. But Soros was a little Jewish boy in Hungary in the 1940s. And when the Nazis invaded, his father sort of hid him away with a Catholic family, or a Protestant, a Christian family. But the father of that family was a capo. His job was confiscating Jewish property for the Nazis. And little George went along doing this, and he said it was the best fun he ever had. This is how sick this man is.
Huh. Wow.
But then the Soviets invade Hungary, and they were hanging Nazi collaborators from the lampposts. They were shooting them and sending them to Siberia. Yet George Soros, who is effectively a Nazi collaborator, was allowed to leave Soviet-occupied Hungary, travel through Soviet-occupied Austria, through numerous Soviet checkpoints out to the west. Now, how would you do that had you not made a deal with the authorities? How would you do it?
I think you're right.
Absolutely.
And so ever since that time, I believe he's been getting a lot of money and a lot of tips from the KGB. You can build up a lot of money if the KGB is giving you financial tips. We all remember the old Armand Hammer of the 1920s, the multi-billionaire who basically kept the Soviet, the American communist multi-billionaire who kept the Soviet revolution alive through trading with the West, made huge amounts of money out of that. Well, I think basically George Soros is today's Armand Hammer. He is doing the dirty work of the Russians in Moscow by undermining America and Israel and Western Europe every chance he gets. And that man should be in jail. That man should be subpoenaed before the U.S. Senate and put on trial, because he is one of the most dangerous people out there. But I just want people to understand, I don't think he's the top of the tree. I think he's just one of the links in the chain.
Who do you think the top of the tree is?
I think it goes back to Moscow. I think it goes back to Putin and his KGB people there. That's where I think it goes. And obviously the United Nations, which is controlled by Russia effectively.
Yes.
Wow. Hey, Trevor, I want to jump back to the Secretary of State, because I found out about that and really started following that because of your website that really exposed that, the connection to George Soros and the Secretary of State. Well, John Kitzhaber, the state of Oregon's past governor, got booted out because him and his gal pal was getting, the whole story, special favors. So Kate Brown, who was elected, one of the first ones elected with the Secretary of State for the state of Oregon project with George Soros, moves on to governor, and that's part of the reason. If there is an issue, they also realize that the Secretary of State moves to governor. And we had an election. I can't even remember because there's so much going on with elections and everything like that. Dennis Richardson. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but he's a pretty conservative man who ran. Yeah, and he won. And he's coming out with all these audits of the failures of the foster care system in the state of Oregon. I mean, that's what we need. He's not partisan at all. He's doing the job, and that's what he ran on. And I think we need more races like that. And we're talking progressive Oregon. I mean, we're just Northern California with, different zip code is what I like to say.
With a beautiful, much more beautiful scenery. Look, Oregon is the most like New Zealand of all the states, and I love Oregon. But you'll see, back in 2008, you had the famous race when Al Franken won the election in Minnesota against, I've forgotten the guy's name, but it was a Norm somebody. It was a very close fought race, and they ended up winning on a recount by about 200 votes or something, Norm Coleman. Now, the Secretary of State that time was a guy called Mark Ritchie, who was a secret ally of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party wanted Franken to win because they needed another vote in the Senate to get Obamacare through. So Mark Ritchie just kept on finding more votes until finally, after a whole lot of shenanigans, Al Franken was given the Senate seat. He voted for Obamacare, and it went through. So we are seeing this all over the country. We have to understand that the Democrats operate in a whole different ethical universe than we do. We believe that you play fair and you count the votes. They believe that they are underground warriors fighting the mighty capitalist establishment, and any lying, cheating, or stealing to overturn the capitalist, fascist Republican Party is perfectly ethical and justified. They just think they're leveling the playing field. They have the mentality, like the old Hogan's Heroes show back in the 60s. We used to cheer the American prisoners of war on when they cheated and lied and stole off the Nazis. We thought that was fine because the Nazis are bad guys. Well, these Democrats and communists and progressives think they are the underground resistance fighters against world fascism. So they have no qualms about stealing votes, vote fraud, signing up illegal immigrants to vote. None of that at all. So until we realize that we're not playing on a level playing field and they will cheat at every opportunity, we're going to keep losing races and we may lose the country.
They believe that the ends justify the means.
Absolutely.
And we are the good warriors who believe that the means are everything. We are judged by the way that we behave, and therefore we play according to our Christian values. That's what Western culture is based on, after all, our Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We are playing fair. We give them the benefit of the doubt, and they lie, cheat, and steal every single chance they get and have no conscience about it whatsoever. And we have to get real about that. We are dealing with communists here. We're not dealing with Harry Truman Democrats. We're not dealing with JFK Democrats or even Jimmy Carter Democrats. We're dealing with full-on Marxists. I say in my movie, and I don't resolve from this, there's 100 members of the House and 20 members of the Senate who couldn't pass a background check because they are basically Marxists or Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers, and they are enemies of the country. They are those, when you take an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic, well, they are the domestic enemies.
How long have you been researching these American senators and House, representatives? How long have you been into this? Because I know you said about 8 years, but you have a vast knowledge of this, and you know what you're talking about. So what is it that started you down this path of researching and starting to inform people about this?
Look, I started back in New Zealand in the 80s because we had a situation in 1984. I was 7 at the time, I believe, I think. But in 1984, we elected a socialist Labour government, a more socialist Labour government, and they banned nuclear warships from our harbours. And that destroyed the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance. Now, that was planned from Moscow. And I know that because I met a New Zealander who had infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party for our security services. He was a government spy inside the Communist Party. And in 1983, he was sent to Moscow to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning. 6,000 students from all over the world being taught how to undermine and overthrow their own country. And that is where he helped to plan with the Soviet instructors New Zealand's anti-nuclear legislation. It was all planned out of Moscow. And what he taught me was, because mostly through the Western world and Canada and the United States and Britain and France, the communists control the labor movement, which they do in America now, and the labor movement controls the Democratic Party or the Canadian Liberal Party or the British Labour Party. So the communists make policy, they make it union policy, and the unions make it Democratic Party policy. That's where a nuclear deal for Iran came from. That's where Obamacare came from. That's where the push for immigration amnesty came from. That's where the normalization of relations with Cuba came from. All of that was communist policy, made labor union policy, made Democratic Party policy. So I started studying the American Democratic Party and the communist movement here in the early 2000s. I discovered Obama's ties to Frank Marshall Davis. I started coming to America, and I started going through archives all over your country. Because what happens is when your local communists, and every town has one, when they get old, being good atheists, they want to leave a mark in posterity. So they gather all their papers up, their membership books, their petitions, their diaries, and they put them together in some boxes and donate them to the local library so somebody can come along in 100 years and write a wonderful book about their revolutionary life. And I go in and find those archives and I photograph them, and you would not believe the incriminating stuff you find in there, the links to your senators and your congressmen. It is all there if any journalist has the gumption to look for it. But that's where I find much of it.
What have you found? I know you're writing a book, and what can you give us an example of one or two of these senators or representatives where you've dug up the dirt on them?
Well, say Judy Chu from California, not far from you.
Yep.
Judy Chu, for instance, was a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, a radical Maoist outfit. She is still working with them now. She goes to China on a regular basis, and the Chinese press describes her as China's best friend in your Congress.
Oh, gosh.
You want to see Judy Chu when she's on the Judiciary Committee, the body that oversees the FBI, right? So when the FBI arrests a Chinese spy, you want to see the hard time that Judy Chu gives them. They are racist. You're only arresting this man because you're racists. So Judy Chu is basically covering for China in your government all the time. And she has got a whole bunch of comrades doing that as well. And then I'll give an example, Kamala Harris from your state.
Yes, she'll probably run for president, by the way.
That's what I'm getting to. She is being engineered now to be your next president. And that is being done by a guy called Steve Phillips from San Francisco, who was a Maoist at Stanford University in the 80s. He was a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle. He was also a member of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition.
Oh.
And the whole of the League of Revolutionary Struggle was running the Rainbow Coalition. It was a Maoist operation from top to bottom. So Steve Phillips has written a book called Brown is the New White, endorsed by Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. And he argues very simply that 26% of the electorate are progressives of color. No, are white progressives. They'll vote Democrat no matter what. 25% are progressives of color, black, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay American, Muslim American. This is where the Rainbow Coalition came from. The brown, the white, the black, the yellow, the lavender, the red, the green. So Steve Phillips is a very rich man because he married into the very wealthy Sandler family from San Francisco. Mega billionaire Democrat donors. Steve Phillips has been financing candidates of color all around the country. When the Alabama race was on, when Roy Moore got in trouble, Steve Phillips poured his people into there, and they signed up tens of thousands of black and Latino voters and 20,000 Muslim voters, and they won by 20,000 votes. He is doing the same thing right now all through the southern states, and they are going to run the Rainbow Coalition strategy in 2020. That's what they're going to do. And the thing is this, there was a young football player at Stanford University called, is a young black guy, and he hung around with the radicals, hung around with Steve Phillips. He's now the senator from New Jersey. His name is Cory Booker.
Yes.
There was also a young woman called Maya Harris who hung around with the radicals at Stanford. Her sister is Kamala Harris. Steve Phillips has been right behind Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, backing them and financing them. And they are engineering them to run at the top of the ticket in 2020. They're going to have a female, half Asian, half black candidate, and probably a black vice presidential candidate, and they're going to run the Rainbow Coalition strategy right across the nation. And they think they can win with 51, 52, 53% of the vote by doing that. But I can.
That is terrifying.
It's scary. It's really scary because now that you've laid it out that these forces come directly from China and Russia through the unions into Democrat policy, and we all know that the Democrat policy, that the boots on the ground are the media. That's how it all comes. So our media is essentially controlled by communism. I mean, that's where the mainstream media gets its marching orders, is from communism.
100%. Now, I'll give you an example of the Chinese influence here too. You know, Virginia was a red state, right?
I grew up in Virginia. I know.
Well, now it's almost blue, especially in Northern Virginia. They flipped a whole bunch of seats in the last election because you have an organization there called New Virginia Majority, which is a front for the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, the pro-Chinese Maoist group that is behind Black Lives Matter. Now, this group, New Virginia Majority, has signed up over 300,000 new voters in the last couple of years, black, Latino, Muslim, etc. They also work with Terry McAuliffe, who is the governor there, to legalize the voting of felons.
Yes.
So doing that flipped Virginia, and they have a very sophisticated get out the vote operation, and that all the data they use comes out of a university in China, which is out of a department where another member of Freedom Road Socialist Organization is compiling all the information. So they are using Chinese-sourced a Chinese university to get them the computerized data they need to win those seats. And you cannot tell me the Communist Chinese government does not know what this academic working in the universities is doing.
Oh, absolutely they do.
We know what a police state they are. They've got an American communist working in their university supplying very sophisticated computer data using the Chinese university systems to give to Virginia to win seats in Virginia. And I believe they're doing the same thing in Florida, because there's a new Florida majority, a sister group down there run by the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And these people are working very closely with Steve Phillips, and they're working Virginia hard, they're working Georgia very hard. They're behind Stacey Abrams, the candidate for the governorship of Virginia. They're behind Andrew Gillum, the candidate for the governor of Florida. And that doesn't even include Democratic Socialists of America, which is 30,000 members. It doesn't include the work the Communist Party USA is doing around the country. All of these groups are working together to take over the Democratic Party and win seats all over the country for progressives, for radical hardline progressives. So we are in, without any exaggeration, an attempted communist takeover of this country.
Through the elections, there is a Russian collusion with the Democrat Party. That's exactly what's going on. It's a collusion with Democrats. Well, it is. It's not even funny. It's a collusion with the Democrats to take over the United States through the election process. The very same thing that Obama said, it was just so impossible, no one ever could take over. Well, they're doing it legitimately by signing up a lot of voters to vote for the very most progressive candidate they can get.
Hey, do you guys remember 2012 presidential debate? Governor Romney, the 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back?
Yeah. Well, he was right. You know, when he said Russia is the number one geopolitical enemy of the United States, he was 100% right. Absolutely. I wasn't a Mitt Romney fan, but he was right on that point. And unfortunately, we've got a whole bunch of American conservatives and Christians who think because Vladimir Putin puts a cross on every now and then and talks to the Russian Orthodox Church and goes on about how much he despises the gay rights movement, they think he's our friend.
I know.
He just threatened to nuke. He just threatened to nuke Florida, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Vladimir Putin. I'll tell you this. Look it up on the internet. Vladimir Putin keynoted and organized an international communist youth gathering in Sochi, Russia in October last year with about 60,000 communists, including a whole delegation from America, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And Vladimir Putin intervened to get them the venue and worked with the organizers personally and keynoted the event. There's a big stadium full of communists, all these young communists listening rapt to Vladimir Putin. It's like a Hitler Youth rally. You can see it online. And all these people out there think Putin's our friend. We love Mr. Putin. He's going to save us from the Muslim hordes. He is behind the Muslim hordes. We did a movie last year.
The Muslim hordes aid communism. They agitate for communism.
They're tools, just like the Black Lives Matter people are tools. It doesn't mean they all understand that. Most of them think they're dying for Allah. They don't realize they're dying for Vladimir Putin. You know, and they might have a different attitude if they did. But we got to wake up to this thing. Russia and China are working together with Iran, with Cuba and Venezuela and several other countries to take America down. And they're doing it electorally, they're doing it with agitation, like Black Lives Matter and the anti-Trump protest movement. They're doing it financially, they're doing it every espionage, every way they can. And America is so slack on internal security, it's basically a sitting duck.
And the indoctrination of our children are at it as well. I mean, I've walked into public high school classrooms and see pictures of Putin up on the wall and a sign underneath, Big Brother is watching you. I mean, and then you shift that over to the political activists from the Parkland shooting. You know, they got kids like David Hogg, Emma. I mean, all those kids have a right to vent. They have a right to, you know, be emotional. What they went through was preventable. It was tragic. But every time you turn around, they're over on CNN I mean, the Communist News Network, as I like to say it, or the Chicken Noodle News Network. I mean, the future, honestly, are the children, and I hate to say we're screwed.
We're losing a generation, and we're doing a new movie right now. It's called Enemies Within the Church, and so we've always understood that the Catholic Church has been penetrated for a long time. Well, you got a Marxist Pope now,
This is so sad. It's true. Yes, it is.
Yeah. There's a battle in the Catholic Church between the conservative factions and the communist factions. We know that most of the mainstream churches have been penetrated. The Episcopalians, the Lutherans. That's old history. But what we've really missed is that the young evangelicals are all going Marxist now. You have got the Gospel Coalition, which is a Marxist group. You've got all these left-wing evangelists like Lynn Hybels and Bill Hybels sending young evangelicals over to Palestine to work with the communists and Muslim Brotherhood over there and get brainwashed by them. The young evangelicals who elected Ronald Reagan and supported Israel to the hilt are now supporting Palestine and would vote for Bernie Sanders. And this is very dangerous for the future of this country.
How are they doing that? I mean, it sounds like this is your new book. That's Enemies
Within
the Church. New movie.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know you've got a book out, and let's set these things up because you're fascinating to listen to. I want to read everything that you've written about it. So please tell us what the name of your book is, and then let's get into the movie.
Well, I've got 2 books on the market. I've got Barack Obama and the Enemies Within, but that's sort of a little bit out of date now. But that's 700 pages on Obama's communist ties. I've also got I've got the Enemies Within, communists, socialists, and progressives in the U.S. Congress, and that profiles 51 congressmen and 14 senators. I'm now doing an update of that, which will have more than 20 senators in it, and probably over 70 congressmen. But I did a movie last year, The Enemies Within, all about the infiltration of the Congress and the Senate. And people can get that by going to enemieswithinmovie.com. Enemieswithinmovie.com. That's had over, I think, about 800,000 unique views on Amazon Prime now. And I did 3 small movies last year. One, you just get those for free online. Just Google them. It's just America Under Siege, Antifa, America Under Siege, Soviet Islam, and America Under Siege, Civil War 2017. So just Google Trevor Loudon, America Under Siege, and those movies will come up. So this movie that we're doing now, and we're looking for donations for that. We're looking for support. Just enemieswithinthechurch.com. enemieswithinthechurch.com is going to look at the history of the communist infiltration of the churches. And we'll go way back to the Reformation. We'll do a lot about the early 20th century penetration of the churches by the Soviet Union and actual real card-carrying communists. But we'll follow it right up to the present day, where you've got this new coalition of Marxist evangelists led by people like Jim Wallace, but also people like Lynn and Bill Hybels, also by people like Rick Warren, who are basically spreading the socialist gospel right through the evangelical churches, right into the young people. Like, we got a little clip, and all these young evangelicals go to this big conference in Missouri. And who lectures them? Is it some pastor? No, it's somebody from Black Lives Matter, somebody from the organization of Black Struggle, a Freedom Road socialist organization, who tells them that God wants them to get rid of white privilege. This is what God wants, because they know what God wants, right? So there's nothing, you go into these churches, you talk to these young evangelicals, there's nothing to do with repentance. There's nothing to do with the Gospels. It's all global warming, supporting Palestine, ministering to the poor, pushing for Obamacare, All this left. You'd think you're in a Bernie Sanders meeting if you go into most churches, most of these churches. And that is something we have really missed, because the evangelical churches are flipping before our very eyes. And that is a huge voting base and a huge cultural base. You know, Andrew Breitbart used to say very wisely that politics is downstream from culture. You know, culture determines politics. Yeah, well, culture is downstream from religion. Religion determines culture, and culture determines politics. So we're going to lose our country if we don't get on top of this corruption of the churches, because it's just going to take things right out of our grasp demographically, if nothing else. So, yeah, we're facing a few challenges, and that's why I write the movies, I write the books I do, and produce the movies that I do. And I think enemies within will knock your socks off if you haven't seen it.
I'm going to see it.
Look, these congressmen and senators who are basically working for the other side will blow you away. But I think the churches in this country are going to get a heck of a shake-up when they see how deep the corruption has gone in their churches as well. Because most of them are too nice to criticize bad guys, you know. They always give these false preachers and these Marxist preachers the benefit of the doubt. But we're going to show this is malicious, this is malfeasance, this isn't just innocent error. There's some malicious people working on this.
Hey, Trevor. I want to bring up, or I got a question for you, is who do you think, because you say you're updating the book to add about 20 senators and approximately 70 members of the House? Did I hear that right? Who do you think is the most dangerous out of each for the listeners?
Well, I'll tell you who was the most dangerous until very recently, and that was John Conyers. Because John Conyers was head of the Judiciary Committee, and he was overseeing the FBI. But he had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA, 40 years with Democratic Socialists of America, was a big supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was also actively supporting the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. And he is the one who shut down the House Un-American Activities Committee. He is the one who helped to stop the Muslim Brotherhood being designated as a terrorist organization, and he lauded it over the FBI. You know, do you think the FBI is going to go after congressmen when their budget depends on the Judiciary Committee?
Not even close.
No, they're not. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. I would say now, in the Senate and in the House, it's Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut. Probably Nancy Pelosi and Rosa DeLauro. Nancy's got a long communist history, even though she's filthy rich. But Rosa DeLauro is about the second or third ranking Democrat in the House. She's very actively involved in the Connecticut Communist Party. Her best friend is Joelle Fishman, the head of the Connecticut Communist Party, and she is the communist who is delegated to get as many left-wing Democrats elected as possible. That's her job inside the Communist Party. Now, Rosa DeLauro is the woman who decides which Democrats get put on which committees. So she can put people on the Armed Services Committee or the Intelligence Committee or the Education Committee. So she works with the top communists in Connecticut whose job it is to get radicals elected. And when they get elected, her friend Rosa DeLauro decides which committees they go on to. So, you know, how that's pretty influential in my opinion.
Do you think that Rosa DeLauro is more dangerous than Representative Keith Ellison? I mean, because he is very progressive. He's very radical, in my opinion.
Yeah, he'd probably be number two. But look, she's got more power.
Oh,
but I'll tell you, see, Keith Ellison has a long history with the Communist Party. The Communist Party elected him. He's got a long history of with the Muslim Brotherhood. They paid for his pilgrimage to Mecca. He is a perfect example of the red-green axis. And he is he's the number two man at the Democratic National Committee. So that's powerful. but he isn't the worst of them. You know, he's not on any real sensitive committees. I'll tell you who I think is more dangerous, and that is Andre Carson, the other Muslim member of Congress, because he serves on the Intelligence Committee overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies. Now, if you go to our movie, enemieswithinmovie.com, we've got a clip there of Andre Carson at a Muslim Brotherhood Front conference in Connecticut in 2012. And Andre gets up in front of the audience and he's got a big grin on his face and he says this: "I understand there are people in the audience spying on us. They are watching us undercover because you believe we are here plotting to overthrow this nation. Well, I say to you people here undercover, Allah will not allow you to stop us." This guy serves on the Intelligence Committee, people. He oversees the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. How do you think he would ever get a security clearance to drive a school bus? Couldn't be a lawyer. He couldn't be a realtor in Florida. Yet he's on the Intelligence Committee, as is Jim Himes from Connecticut, who did his thesis on the Nicaraguan Sandinistas and was elected by the Communist Party. You know, as was Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, who was a former leader of the pro-Cuban Puerto Rican Socialist Party. But none of this disqualifies these people serving on the Intelligence Committee. You know, the top Democrat on the Homeland Security Committee, Benny Thompson, worked with the Cubans to get American doctors training in Cuba. Most of those doctors are the sons and daughters of American Communist Party members. Yet he's the top man on the Homeland Security Committee. You got Mark Vasey from Texas, who serves on the Armed Services Committee, and he's best friends with Gene Lance, who is the head of the Texas Communist Party. And Lance has got him elected time after time. So this goes on and on and on. You know, you in the Senate, it's the same. You know, Chuck Schumer's bad. You know, Elizabeth Warren has got extensive ties to Democratic Socialists of America. And
hey, Trevor, can I stop you real quick?
Yeah. Oh, look, I go on. I just.
Trevor, we could listen. Susan and I could listen to you all day long because we are both deep rooted and we love this kind of stuff. Did you see the gentleman, Dr. Shiva, who's running against the fake Indian, as he likes to put it on his campaign? The real Indian will beat the fake Indian.
Oh, yeah, the real Indian running against Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren. Yeah, that's right. Well, good luck to him.
Absolutely.
But hey, tell us again before, I know we're getting close to having to wrap up. Tell us again the name of your book, where they can find. I mean, you are just a trove of information and details about all of the different names, these 100, people in our House of Representatives. Where can we find it all? You've got it all laid out. Let us find it.
Yeah,
also, tell us your social media as well.
Okay. Well, Enemies Within Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the U.S. Congress. Just go to Amazon. You order it there. Okay. The Enemies Within movie. You can get that on Amazon, or it's got over 800 reviews, I think, right now. Most of them are 5s, and there's about 100 1s because all the leftists go on and
of course
to bring the average
said
down.
To go and downgrade it, right?
They're all 5s except for for the 1s,
Yeah, right. All of the pajama wearing communists who are in their basement dinging it.
They're in their basement trolling away.
Yeah.
And so go to Enemies Within. You just go to Enemies. Yeah, look it up on Amazon. Both of them you get on Amazon. And my
social media
is trevorloudon.com, or you just look Trevor Loudon on Twitter. But trevorloudon.com is my daily blog. And I've also got another website called KeyWiki, KeyWiki.
That's
now
my
that's
favorite.
like a Wikipedia for communists. There's 104,000 files on that. So if you want to look up Ron Wyden and his background or you want to look up.
I don't.
Okay.
I do. Oh yeah, this is great.
Okay.
Go to
But it
Wiki.
Yeah, it's 104,000 files, everything from street level radicals, anarchists and Maoists, right up to the Joe Bidens, the Barack Obamas, the Hillary Clintons, the Tim Kaines, but also most of the Democrat senators around your country, most of the Democrat congressmen, and a few Republicans, one or two. So it gives the background, their communist connections, their socialist connections, their Muslim Brotherhood connections. Dick Durbin would be the most dangerous one in the Senate, I would say.
Because I wouldn't be surprised.
He is working with pro-North Koreans to push DACA down your throat. Pro-North Korean
I saw
element.
that. I was reading that article today. Hey, Trevor, we want to thank you so much for coming on. And next time you're in Oregon, I would love to buy you a beer.
Yeah, well, look, I'd be happy to drink it with you. I love Oregon. It's one of my favorite states.
And tell us where you're touring next. I know you're in Iowa right now on your tour. You said you're going to be coming to Orange County soon. And if people want to come and find where you're speaking, where are you going to be? Well,
just go to my blog, trevorloudon.com, and at the top article is the list of my California dates. So I've got one in Northern California and several up by Yosemite somewhere, and several in Southern California, Burbank, San Diego, Orange County area. And
in Burbank, maybe I can find you if you're around when I'm here. That'd be great.
Yeah, March the 8th till the 17th, we're in California. The one in Burbank, unfortunately, I'll be there speaking in the first, right at 9 o'clock in the morning, but then I'll probably have to leave and go up to Northern California for that evening.
All right. Hey, thanks a bunch, Trevor. I hate to cut you off, but we're up against the break. You're listening to Common Sense Radio on the Lanterns Radio Network.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, guys.